KoitCast. Today's guest is an international best-selling author who inspires audiences globally with his intriguing story of perseverance and inner strength. A horrific car accident left him with multiple life-threatening injuries and led to incredible out-of-body and near-death experiences. A big Koit welcome to Jeffery Olsen. Hi Jeffery, welcome to KoitCast.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for having me.
No worries, it's an honour to have you here, so thank you for coming. I suppose we should jump straight in. So in your own words, who are you, where are you from, etc.?
Wow. My name is Jeffery Olsen. I am an author. I'm a near-death experiencer. I'm a survivor. I work as a creative director. I live in the Rocky Mountains of Utah. I live up in the Wasatch Back, and I've gone back home onto a little farm. So I hang out with the horses and the sheep and the birds and
Chickens?
I really chickens as well. Yes, chickens and there's animals. It's a little farm and it's a beautiful little part of the world, and I call it home.
Excellent. That is exactly the sort of setup that me and Tiffany want to do. Get to a
Oh,
point where we have a homestead with, she's into, she's got horses and stuff, but chickens and pigs
yeah,
and what have
yeah.
you. Yeah. Fair play.
Same thing. Yeah, in fact, with my son, my oldest son lives very near to me, and we just built, he's calling it the Cluckingham Palace, but it's a very large chicken coop that, gosh, he could accommodate 30 or 40 chickens in that thing if he wanted to. And we've had fun building that together. It's been a good project.
I bet it has been. Yeah, I like building as well. The egg scenario, right? Obviously, you've got a shed load of chickens. What do you do with all the surplus eggs?
Well, it's interesting. They started last year with, they got like 6 chickens,
Okay.
2 years ago. And yeah, they're eating all those eggs, and now people want eggs. But with the 6 chickens, they eat about everything the chickens produce. My son loves eggs. He'll make a 6 eggs omelet, in the morning before he goes to work. And so they wanted more. Now they've purchased a bunch. They've got about 20 chickens now, and they're not big enough to be laying. They just got them early this spring. But that's what's in the Cluckingham Palace is all these new chickens. And so eventually, yeah, they'll have a bunch of eggs, and they'll sell them to neighbors or give them to people who want them and deserve them, and it'll be a fun little project for them. Yeah.
Or a 20-egg omelette breakfast. Yeah.
Yeah, he'll probably eat them. I don't know. He's thin as a rail, but he's got a metabolism. He eats twice as much as I do, and he never puts on a pound. He's just thin and lean and very fit.
I had that exact same thing up until I had a hospital experience when I was 27. And as soon as I hit that age, boom, my sort of metabolism, whatever it was, changed, and then the gut starts appearing.
It happens. It happens. Tell me about it. It happened. I mean, I'm well on in my years at this point, but yeah, I used to be able to eat anything I wanted, anytime I wanted, and now my body tells me, "Oh, hey, you ate all that," and it does. Age shifts the metabolism for sure.
Very much so, very much so. Okay, so thank you for ever so much for that. Let's just jump into the story of your near-death experiences, and then obviously we'll follow up with other things, and then your out-of-body experiences and stuff. So I suppose, can you go through that story with me? And you can start wherever you wish.
Yes, I can, and it's always an interesting time of the year. It was this time of the year that it happened. It's been 28 years ago, and I mean, I think viewers should know that. I couldn't speak of this for a decade. I would just cry. It was too painful, too personal, and now I can speak of it. I can speak of it, and it's like it was yesterday. The details of the out of body or near death experience are very fresh. I don't remember. I had to check in with my family and the hospital, like how many surgeries did I have and things like that. But yeah, the near death experience is very fresh, and I can speak of it openly now, and it's actually somewhat healing to process, to talk. So yes, we can talk about that, and I can go back 28 years ago, and it was a family vacation. We'd spent the Easter weekend in southern Utah. We loaded up the boys, and it was me, my wife, and our 2 sons. And we went down to visit some of her family that was there and to celebrate Easter. And it was on the trip back, loaded everyone in the car, buckled the kids in. And it was interesting. There's parts of that day I will always remember. We were ready to leave, and I was just pulling away from the curb. I put the car in drive and I was just pulling away, and my wife said, "Stop, wait." And I thought she'd forgotten something. And she looked at me and she said, "I just want to say goodbye to mom and dad one more time." We had been visiting her parents. We'd stayed at their home and they were out on the porch, waving the way grandma and grandpa do. And I stopped the car and she jumped out and I watched as she ran up to them and she not only hugged them, but she kissed them, which was not out of the ordinary, but I observed it and I noticed it. And I bring this up for a specific reason because she must have gotten an impression. She must have heard that whisper. She must have had that feeling or that thought, "I want to say goodbye to mom and dad one more time." And the beautiful thing is she acted on it.
Mm.
Stop. And she ran up and I watched as she hugged them and kissed them. And as the day played out, that was the last goodbye. So that's part of the memory that will never become cloudy. And that was certainly very much in this realm. As she jumped in the car and buckled up, and I hit the interstate and I put the car on cruise control about 75 miles per hour. We're driving up the interstate, and I had an interesting thing happen. We were driving, and I just looked in the rearview mirror, just literally a moment, just to check traffic to see what was going on. And as I looked in the rearview mirror, I noticed my youngest son, and he was sound asleep in his car seat, Griffin, and he was only 14 months old. He was just a toddler. And he'd been toddling about and he was learning to say a few words, but he was sound asleep and I saw how peaceful he was. And he was the miracle boy. I mean, he was the one where we didn't know if we would have more children. And there he was, and he was beautiful. And I noticed details in that moment. Like I noticed how long his eyelashes were. It was simple little things like that. And I thought, well, there's our miracle child. And again, this is a moment, this is a glance. And then I heard my oldest son behind me in the seat behind me, and he was playing with action figures. And the whole car was filled with the joyous noise of this little boy. And I glanced over at my wife, who had also laid her seat back, and she was sound asleep as well, but she was still holding on to my hand. And I had this moment. I'm like, wow, we're 10 years into a marriage. We're both pursuing our careers, we're raising these children, and she's still holding on to my hand. It was this absolute moment of gratitude of like, wow, look what I'm surrounded with. And I'll always remember that as well. I mean, it was a glance, it was a moment, and I've learned that life is just moments. I mean, it's just moment to moment to moment. But that was a profound moment for me, given what was going to take place about an hour and a half after that. And there was reports of crosswinds. There was reports of a pickup truck that was driving erratically on the interstate. Um, I remember the wind. I don't remember anything else like that. One of the hardest parts of the story is I believe I may have just dozed off at the wheel, just nodded off, and there's no excuse for that. I think back of the situation. I was a young man. I was 33 years old. I was building a business. I was chasing a career. I was doing those 12, 14, 16-hour days to make
Mm.
ends meet, to be the provider, to be the protector. And again, there's no excuse for it, but I believe I just nodded off briefly. And in doing so, I swerved to the right. I overcorrected to the left, and I lost control of the car. And the car then began to roll.
Crikey.
Yes, not off the road, but down the road at 75 miles per hour. And it was a horrific automobile accident. I mean, the accident reports say the car rolled no less than 6 or 8 times. Um, I was aware we were crashing. I blacked out for the crash. I realized, ooh, wow, overcorrection. We go into the roll, and I blacked out, quite honestly. But when the car came to a complete stop, I was very much aware. Um, very much aware. And the first thing I heard was my 7 year old son, my oldest son, crying hysterically in the back seat. And my inclination, is I've got to get to my boy. I've got to get to my son. And that's when I realized I couldn't move. I was pinned either to the seat or the floorboard. I was somewhat disoriented. I, there was all the broken glass. I was unaware of my injuries. I mean, what had actually happened to me is both of my legs had been crushed and shattered. My left leg was eventually amputated above the knee.
God.
My back had been damaged. My rib cage had been damaged. My lungs were collapsing. My right arm had almost been completely torn out or off. I mean, there was no muscle connecting the rotator cuff, and it was severely dislocated. And then the seatbelt had cut through me and ruptured all my
Whoa.
intestines. I wasn't aware the adrenaline. I mean, I all I knew is I mean, I knew I was in pain. I knew I was struggling to breathe, but the adrenaline was I've got to get to my boy. I've got to get to my son. I heard him crying, and that's when the brutal reality hit that no one else was crying. And I became very aware in that moment. It's still very tender. I knew that my wife, Tamara, was gone. I won't go into what I witnessed or what I
Sure, sure,
saw.
I understand.
And I knew my toddler, my youngest son, Griffin, was gone. They were killed instantly in the accident. And that's the darkest hell I may ever be in. I mean, here I was with a hysterical 7 year old I can't get to. Half the family has passed. I'm losing consciousness, and I was driving the car. I mean, the guilt, the regret. I mean, I was sober. I was going the speed limit, but I kept thinking, can't I get those 3 seconds back? What happened? What happened? And I don't set that up to be morbid or graphic. That was the setting when the near death experience began. I mean, here I was in this dark panic. I mean, absolute horrific panic, and I felt light come. I mean,
You
light.
felt light.
I felt it like
Oh,
light
whoa.
to me, like light. I felt light come and surround me, like tangible light. It was a unique experience. I, and it's as if the light was comforting me in this horrific trauma. And then it felt like I was rising above the accident scene. And I was a little bit confused. The question I had, because suddenly the pain was gone, I could breathe. And I was saying to myself, how can I possibly be okay? What is happening? And then as I was in that light, just kind of getting my bearings, like what's happening, suddenly Tamara, my wife, who I knew was deceased at the scene, um, suddenly she was there in the light with me, but she was very much alive. I mean, gorgeous, radiant. There was no injuries like I had witnessed in the accident. She was beautiful and very much alive, but emphatic. Jeff, you can't be here. You can't be here. You've got to go back. You have got to go back. You can't be here. And it was quite emotional, quite honestly. I mean, I we had a conversation. I mean, here she was, and we're communicating, but it was so intense. It was different even than it was like super sensory. Um, we were communicating, but we were so connected, and some of the communication was with words, and some of it was telepathic, and she was emotional. It's as if I could see her and taste her tears and feel everything. And we had a conversation. I mean, if I stayed with her, our 7 year old would be orphaned. It was communicated to me he's going to be okay. And we made a deal. For whatever reason, she could not come back, but I could. And she's like, "You've got to go back. You've got to raise our boy." And we made this. decision. And that may be the most profound goodbye I've ever said. There I was looking at the woman I loved more than life. And yet I knew I had a child in the backseat of that car that needed a parent. And it's so interesting. Like, I didn't have to figure out how do I go back? I mean, how do our thoughts are so powerful. I mean, it was the intention. I'm going back. And I said goodbye. I held her one last time. And then whoosh, it's like I found myself moving about a very busy level one trauma center, emergency room setting, a hospital. And I have no concept in the bubble of light in this. It felt like a holding place, the words are difficult. But I later found out that people had arrived at the scene of the accident. My son was also injured and banged up pretty good, but not seriously. I mean, his ribs were bruised, his wrist was broken, and he was obviously distraught. Um, I had to be extricated from the car given my injuries, and then I was life flighted or airlifted to the nearest level one trauma center. I didn't know any of that. All I knew is I'd crashed the car. I'd said this profound goodbye and made this choice. And here I was moving about a very busy level one trauma center. And I was very aware, very conscious of everything around me. It's like I had 360-degree consciousness, like everything, the doctors, the nurses, the patients, even the families of the other patients. There was this connectedness. I call it a oneness. I mean, I was aware and felt and was connected to everything, um, everyone I saw. I mean, everyone I saw, I knew them. I knew them perfectly, not by recognition. I felt their soul. I knew their love, their hate, their motivations, their joy, their plans, their thoughts. I mean, there was a nurse that passed me, completely unaware of me, but I felt everything. I even felt the abuse she had suffered as a child. And yet in that same moment, I'm like, look at her magnificence. Wow, she's here in the hospital, healing, helping, serving in such a way that this was true of everyone I encountered. I was seeing them in a profound, majestic light. I felt I'm seeing them as God sees us. I grew up in a Christian home, and I thought, wow, look at them. They're magnificent. And I had a biblical verse, come up in this case. It was the famous verse, in as much as you've done it unto the least of one of these, you've done it unto me. And this was Jesus speaking, and I used to believe that was a really nice verse about being nice and being kind. When I was hungry, you fed me. When I was naked, you clothed me. But the layers of that just peeled back, and I realized, wow, I am them. They are me. We are truly one. I
We
mean,
are one, yes. Yeah.
yes, it was this oneness, and it was all love. There was no judgment of their thoughts or of what had happened. It was just this knowing of their magnificence, of their divinity, if you will. It was a profound experience. It changed me. Judgments and comparisons just went out the window
Hmm.
until I came upon a body or a man, on the gurney that I didn't feel anything from, which I thought was really odd. So I stepped closer to look, and that's when I realized, oh my goodness, that's me. I mean, it wasn't me. I was having this profound connected experience, but there was my body, and it was a mess. I mean,
Did you recognize it via sight or via feeling?
both both sight, and yet I was so swollen. I mean, you probably wouldn't recognize me, but I realized that's me by sight. And then the feeling was overwhelming. This is a beautiful question, because the feeling I had, there was this profound sadness at the condition of my body, but there was also this profound realization that, wow, I took it for granted. I didn't realize how magnificent of a machine our body is. I don't have to remind my heart to beat. I don't have to think about my lungs breathing. I don't have to teach my eyes to see. I mean, I had this reverence, this like, wow, I had no idea. I took it for granted. I didn't realize what a beautiful machine and gift this body is. And there was mine so severely broken. There was the sadness, so severely damaged. And I thought, wow. And I gave my word. I'm getting back in. I'm going back in the body. And again, it wasn't about figuring it out. It was the thought. It was the intention. I'm going back in. And then, boom, back in that body. I mean, the weight, the pain, the trauma, the guilt, the grief, the regret, all of that returned in such a way. It was so heavy. And I was ventilated. They had a big tube
Oh,
going to
yes.
breathe from my lungs. My legs were obviously immobile, having been crushed, and my right arm was immobile, having been so damaged. And they eventually tied down my left hand because I kept grabbing at all the medical equipment. And there I was. I mean, um, you know, wallowing in the grief and trauma of all of it. This experience was profound. It changed the way I felt about a lot of things. Nurses and doctors would come to take care of me. I had so much gratitude. I'm like, wow, the sacrifice. I mean, I was just more aware on a very deep level. There's an interesting part of my story, which really is it's a doctor's story, but as they life flighted me into the hospital and the arena, the operating room, I suppose. The one of the attending physicians, Dr. Jeff O'Driscoll, he's actually written about this and spoken about it. And one of the nurses, as the team was working on my body, and I mean, they had to have, respiratory and orthopedic. There was several surgical experts working on me, and he was overseeing. He wasn't necessarily working on me, but he was overseeing the process. And he had a profound experience where he says that he witnessed my wife's spirit in the operating room, as did one of the
Whoa.
nurses. Now, that's it's like, wow, that's woo woo. But I mean, here were two credible clinicians. I mean, I've heard all the, well, gosh, when you're badly injured, the oxygen shuts down in your brain, you begin to hallucinate. These folks were completely healthy. They weren't dying. They weren't injured. They were there very much aware and conscious. And they had this experience, two of them, where I mean, the doc speaks openly about it. He says he saw my wife's spirit. He didn't know me from Adam, and he didn't know her. He just knew that I was being life flighted in. He knew there had been a fatality. And when he shared this, which is probably the miracle, I mean, they both came to see me when I was out of, ICU, and I was in the hospital for almost 6 months. I mean, I had 18 surgeries and all, but when I was well enough, they came to see me, and I didn't recognize them. I didn't know who they were. I'd had family and friends visit, but they came in, and when they shared that they were part of my original trauma team, I perked up and thought, wow, how kind of you to come see me. Why would you do this? And they, I mean, it was small talk at first, and then the nurse became emotional. She sat down and she began to cry, and she said, "We have to tell you what happened." And I just listened, and she shared how they had experienced my wife's spirit in the operating room. And I looked at the doctor because I had not spoken about what had happened to me. I had, I had kept that very close to the chest. And I looked at the doctor and he said, yeah. He said, I saw her. And he said, she communicated with me. And when I asked, what did she say? What did she communicate? She simply shared her gratitude for everything we were doing to save your life. And I burst into tears. I'm like,
Mm.
they didn't know I'd made this deal. They didn't know that I'd said I'm coming back. They didn't know that we had had this conversation. And it's a side story, but you know, as the doctor has spoken about it openly, and I've spoken about it, even people like Dr. Raymond Moody, who they say is he's the godfather of near-death experiences, and a skeptic, quite honestly. He was researching all of this from a skeptical point of view. And he said, wow, that's the one that kind of pushed me over the edge that, well, there may be something after, because here's not the person dying have the experience. It's well people having the experience at the same time. They call it a shared death experience now. I suppose it has a term, and I believe it happens. But that was a unique part of the story. Um, didn't change the trauma and the grief, but as the doctor shared this, then I became comfortable at one point to share with him what had happened to me. And not that I needed validation, but I thought, well, he's a doctor, he's a clinician. If I'm nuts, they'll take me to the psych ward and get me the help I need. But no, we've actually become good friends because we were able to talk openly about these spiritual things, these mystical things that happen in life. And I don't think it's that uncommon. It's
It's
certainly
definitely
profound.
not uncommon. I've spoke to Raymond actually a few months back, and we
Oh,
had a
good.
big conflab about it, and a few others down the history of this podcast. And I believe that the amount of the people that receive this
Hmm.
gift, if you will, of acknowledging you're going to die or then coming back, is in the millions.
Yeah.
So it's no small thing.
Yeah, in fact, I watched Dr. O'Driscoll was presenting, and also Dr. Bruce Grayson, who's researched this for
Mm.
50 years at the University of Virginia. Yeah, it's not that uncommon. And it's probably worth pointing out. I mean, one of my most profound experiences was at the end of my hospital stay. And again, it may be worth pointing out that wow, the profound experiences were at the scene of the accident before the narcotics and all had been administered. I mean, I was on morphine and everything else in the hospital. But then at the end of my hospital stay, I was out of ICU and I had a horrible hospital. I mean, gosh, I had horrible infections where the seatbelt had ruptured on my insides and all of that going on. I threw not one but two pulmonary emboli, the blood clots that lodge in your lungs. I really should not be here, but we'd made this deal. I mean, my friends laugh and say your own wife kicked you out of heaven, but I was here. I mean, we'd made the deal. I was here, but at the end of my hospital stay, after ICU, after surgical recovery, after all the back and forth, I'm in the rehabilitation wing. I'm very near going home. And I was still, I mean, I was still quite sick. I mean, they were dealing with the amputation. They had rebuilt my right leg, so my right leg was in a brace. They had rebuilt the shoulder, and this arm was in a sling. I just had the one working hand, and they were literally teaching me like how to dress myself within the state
Mm.
of the body. And they had an electric wheelchair that I could, and I couldn't get in the wheelchair. I couldn't transfer into it but that was the state of it. In fact, I had laid so long on my back, I'd rubbed all the hair off the back of my head. I was bald on the back of my head from laying in bed so long on my back. But this particular evening, I was able to roll on my side. They had finally stabilized my abdominal injuries, and I could lay on my side, and I fell into a deep sleep. The strange thing, however, is I was conscious that I was sleeping peacefully. And the thought was, wow, I don't know if I've slept peacefully. I've been traumatized for months. How am I sleeping peacefully? And then I felt that same light come. This like a blanket, this light coming. I was in such grief at the loss of half the family, and I felt again like I was rising above the hospital bed. But this time the light it dispensed, it went away, it like lifted like a fog off a lake. And I was in the most incredible, beautiful place, and I was so happy. I mean, people say heaven, they say the spirit world, the other side. There's all these words. The only word that comes close to what I was experiencing is I was home. I was home. And it felt familiar. It felt so welcoming. And I realized, I looked down, and I thought, I am home and I'm whole. I had both legs and both feet and no pain. And I began running. I had been an athlete. I began running, and it was such a sensory experience. It was so physical. I mean, I could feel the energy of the ground under my feet. I could feel the intelligence in my calves and thighs. I was whole and I was home and I was in this blissful state running about. And then I had the knowing, the message, it's like, you're not here to stay. And at that same time, there was this corridor off to my left, and I knew intuitively I'm to go that way. So I began working my way down the corridor. And at the end of the corridor, I saw a crib. Now, Griffin, my youngest son, as a toddler, he was still sleeping in a crib at the time of the accident. He was climbing out of it and causing all kinds of mischief at home, but this crib intrigued me. And so I raced my way down to this crib and I looked in. And there was my little boy. There he was, sleeping beautifully. I mean, as peacefully as when I'd glanced in the rearview mirror. And again, the details became so prominent. I could, you know, I his hands and the length of his eyelashes. I just thought, what a beautiful son. I mean, I swept him up in my arms, and even that. I don't know if you've ever picked up a sleeping child.
I have
Um,
not personally. I don't have any children.
Yeah, I mean, but there's a heat and a weight to it. Anyone who's done that, and gosh, I picked him up and he felt solid against me. It was such a physical experience, even though I was out of the physical body.
Mm.
And I could feel him breathing. I could feel his breath on my neck. I leaned over and I smelled his hair. I'm like, this is my boy. This is my son. This is him. This is not a dream. I'm experiencing it. And as I held him, I felt this intense presence behind me. I began weeping, thinking I'm really holding him. And then this presence was coming behind me, and it was so powerful and so cosmic and so overwhelming. And my upbringing, my religious background, I thought, oh no, that's God, and I'm in so much trouble. I mean, the guilt again. It's like, wow, my little boy's life was cut short because I was driving the car. I lost control. I dozed off. I whatever. And this presence is coming closer and closer, and the guilt's bubbling up. And I'm holding this child, this beloved boy of mine, and this presence comes right behind me, and I have so much guilt. I mean, I grew up believing that God would judge me, that I would be judged on my life, and here I had failed miserably. I had crashed the car and my son's life was cut so short. And this was the feeling. And then I had this thought as this presence is right there. I thought, oh, I hope I can be forgiven. And, so my conditioning was still very much in my
Mm.
consciousness. But in that thought, and this almost felt physical too, these divine arms just wrapped around and held me and my son. And there was this download. I mean, there was this absolute download. The first communication was, there's nothing to forgive. Everything's in divine order. And I began to argue, how could that be? He's here, and also this thought that life was a test, that I'd failed this test somehow. No, my son, life is not a test, it's a gift. And it's pure truth. And yet I'm questioning, like, wow. And then my life, I began to see my life. I've learned they call it a life review. I began to see, gosh, my parents' divorce, the insecurities that created, my connection with my brothers and how they showed up. I saw things and it's like, oh, that was a mistake. I didn't mean to do that. And the communication was so pure and so loving. The question was simply, well, what did you learn? I mean, here I was. In fact, I saw things in my life. I thought, well, that was wrong. I knew it was wrong and I did it anyway. And the communication from this magnificent being that held me was, that's your judgment of it, not ours. You are so loved. Um, and here I was holding my own child. And to me, he was perfect and he was beloved and he was divine. And yet it was multiplied because here I am in the arms of the divine. And there was so much love. There was no judgment. It was just so much love. And I even was tutored a bit on choice. I mean, I was told you can be mad at God the rest of your life because this was allowed to happen, and half your family passed and you're crippled forevermore. And and yet in that situation I wasn't. Gosh, my body's broken here now in this third dimensional realm, but spiritually it was all still there. But I was told I could be angry at God the rest of my life and that would be okay. I'd be loved anyway. I was told I could beat myself up the rest of my life because I was driving the car and that guilt could have ruined me. Um, and I was given a third choice. And this was interesting. And again, given my cultural upbringing and background, the being that held me said, I want you to exercise your will. I want your will to be done. And I'm like, well, whoa, wait a minute. It's your will. If you're God, it's your will be done. I've been taught that since I was a child in Sunday school, and the communication was such, and again, these are things that were so hard to share for years. The communication was such that I was told by the divine holding me, your will is my will. That's how much you're loved. My will is that you have free will, that you get to choose. And it was just mind blowing. And I was told you can choose to give your son back. You can choose to exercise your will. You can hand him over in trust. And it won't feel like he was taken from you or swiped away or cut short. And in all that love, I mean, in all that beauty and all that peace and all that unconditional, non-judgmental glory, if you will, I uh, I was able to kiss my little boy and hand him over and make a choice. And then, then back, I'm in the hospital bed, back to the amputation and the colostomy bag and all these
Oh God.
things. But it was with some different perspective. It's like, wow, number one, there is something so much bigger than I am. And yet the beautiful thing is I am a part of that. I am that. I mean, this was the crazy thing. Like I'm kind of asking the questions in the arms of God, why? And it was as if I had co-created this whole experience. And it's like, but why would I do that? For your soul's expansion. But
That's the
it's
question, isn't it?
yeah,
That's the
yeah, it's
big question. Why would we do what we do? Or
yes,
if you think about it, the plan seems to
yeah,
be created by us for us.
yes.
Yeah, which is very profound in itself.
Very profound in himself. Here I was being held by a greater power, or, I mean, the funny thing is, given my conditioning and upbringing, I didn't dare turn around. I didn't dare turn around and look and see who's
Here's the
that.
question then, Jeff.
Yeah,
If you
yeah.
had have turned round, what do you think you would have seen? Would you have seen anything?
I don't know because I didn't turn around, but the thought, and this is a great question. It's like, yes, would have I encountered a benevolent God? I mean, I don't
Hmm.
know. God has a white beard and sits up. I mean, that's not. Maybe I would have encountered my higher self. Maybe it would have been me holding me. Maybe it was divine light. Maybe it was the entire universe. It almost felt like that. It almost felt like this. And yet it was so personal. I was being held by a being that felt to me like God based on what I believed. And yet the demeanor was not a judgmental God. It was not anything like what I believed it would be. It was absolute benevolent love, unconditional love. And yeah, I can't answer the question because I didn't turn around.
Yeah, sure. Now, that is one. I was going to say one hell of a story, but it's not one hell of a story. It's a beautiful story and a harrowing story all in one. And there's a lot that I would love to unpack with you if you're okay with me revisiting
I,
some of
I
that
would
story and with
I would love
question.
that. And you can ask me anything because this I didn't speak about this for a decade. I was attempting to unpack it myself. But yeah, let's have the conversation. I'd love that.
Perfecto. Okay, so the first thing that I wrote down as part of your story was the goodbye that your wife had to give. Obviously, it was a compulsion for her to get out of the car and go and see her mum and dad again. At that moment, did it seem out of the ordinary for you?
No. I mean, I'll
Ah.
be very honest. I'll be very honest. And I'll admit it. I thought, oh, women, we've said goodbye. Oh, let's go. I mean, this is what I was feeling. So it didn't feel out of the ordinary. I noticed it, however. I did notice it, and it has stuck with me. So
Hmm.
that's out of the ordinary. The hindsight has made it extraordinary. But in that moment, in all honesty, I was like, oh, brother, let's get in the car and go. We said goodbye. Let's get on the road. Let's get moving. And I mean, I can only be honest, but it didn't feel mystical to me. In the car, when I saw my children again, and when I saw my wife and she's still holding my hand, that felt a bit mystical. That was like, wow, gratitude. Look at this. Maybe not out of the ordinary, but in hindsight, that's become extraordinary. That's why I share those things. Maybe extraordinary things are happening to us and we don't realize it in this dimension.
Yeah, or in that moment, which is the
In
phrase
that
you
moment.
used earlier. I look at it as a key bit of recognition at a time that you needed to perhaps revisit that for your own mental well-being. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah,
Yes,
so it's a
absolutely.
gift you gave yourself in that moment, is what I was getting at.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. When you had your crash, clearly that's a terrible scenario. When you got enveloped by the light, you said you had sensory overload, if you will. You could see things, you could hear things. Was there any smells or tastes involved?
I said I could taste Tamra's tears. I mean,
Yes.
and that was in that initial, yeah, the senses were multiplied or enhanced or expanded. In the second experience, when the light went away and here I was in this place, yeah, greatly expanded. Now, for me, and I don't talk about these details because people want to know, well, what's heaven like? Well, I think that's as unique as our life experience. I mean, heaven, uh, but for me, it was this incredible meadow with beautiful waist high grass. I could feel and taste and smell the grass. I could taste the sky. The colors were enhanced. And yet it was such a personal thing of, oh gosh, I'm going down this corridor. I mean, the corridor seemed to be stone like, but there were no windows in it. There were openings. I mean, these are the weird little details. And yet I'm not going to pretend that's how it is because I think even though it's like our lives are so unique. We have different perceptions, but that's what it was like for me.
Mm.
And then to have a very earthly thing, a crib. I'm not even pretending that my little boy is a little boy wandering around in that realm. I have experienced him since in dreams and visions as a grown man. But I do think the universe is so kind. Somewhere, somehow, it was known that I needed to hold my little boy. I mean, had I not had that experience, I don't know where I'd be. I might be the guy strung out on the corner somewhere wondering what happened. Um, but that was the experience.
See,
And so there
the
was
question I
tension.
have, sorry,
Sure.
the question I have to follow up to that, which goes into the choice thing, which I think is a very, very important thing as well, which is, was it the universe knowing that you needed X, Y, and Z, i.e., to hold your son, or was it you projecting out that feeling and need? Do you
It's
know
a
what I
beautiful.
mean?
Well, and here again, what's the difference? That's a great.
Hmm.
What I mean, if I am a divine being, if I am that, therefore I was projecting that from my own soul's healing, I could certainly embrace that too. I mean, yes, we are creators. We do create our own realities. And that's why I'm hesitant to say, well, here's what it's like. It's like, no, here's what it was like for me. Here's what I created from my soul's experience. And knowing the power and divinity of each individual, yeah, perhaps I projected that for me, and it was supported by the universe, the greater power, the I am,
Mm.
whatever, whatever names we want to put on it. That's a great question. I certainly, because that was my longing, that was my desire. I wanted to see my little boy, and therefore I did.
That's it. The intention then played that part because you wanted
Correct.
that part solved. Yes.
Yeah, no, it was a surprise to me. I wasn't expecting that to happen. It wasn't like I orchestrated it knowingly, but that was the deepest desire of my heart, never spoken, and yet then experienced.
Mm.
It, stuff. Yeah.
And that leads into the same question about when you had your crash, and then your wife was there, and she said you've got to go back,
Yeah.
and then the word choice was made mentioned again. You have a choice, but she also said you don't have a choice. You've got to go back. That's the plan, so to speak. So what? How do you reconcile that?
Um, Probably a contract. I mean, and here again, these are great questions. I feel soul contracts. She loved me enough to go and stay, and this was known. This was the blueprint. Here's the dichotomy. Okay, if we have a soul plan, a soul contract, where does the choice come in? But I believe there is choice. I believe we all have a soul contract. We have a plan. We've got a blueprint. But within that blueprint, there's always choice. I mean, what if I'd have said, nope, I'm staying here? Would have that been granted? I don't know.
Hmm.
I don't know, but it did feel like, yeah, I'm going back. I mean, it did feel like this is already decided, even though I'm making a choice. I think my soul knew that's the blueprint, that's the plan. And yeah, I mean, these are such deep questions. These are things we could chew on and debate, and I don't have the answer, but I believe there are contracts. I believe there are plans. I think we co-create them with each other and with the divine, the universe, the greater power. And yet we are that. We're manifestations of that. So therefore, to your original question, yeah, we create it all.
Isn't it weird?
It is
That's
weird.
my question. It's so strange a concept that we're living here now, right? And prior to your accident, you might not have thought as etheric if you hadn't been involved in the world, right? But you're
Right.
living your life as this, and everything in front of you is tangible, and that is our life. And then all of a sudden, your life isn't that. It's now, hold on, I'm something else creating this life. It's just mind blowing, properly.
It really is. I mean,
Hmm.
I've thought of all kinds of scenarios. I mean, a video game. Am I the character, here in this
Hmm.
video game? And yet there's a greater power, a higher power, a higher self, a plan that's orchestrated. And yes, I have choice. I mean, I don't know what example or what metaphor to put on it. It's beautiful in the end and confusing and weird. I
Yes,
like,
all of it.
why would I do this? I mean, really? No, I would have kept the leg at least. But I would have lost the leg and kept the family here. It's like, why would I have thought to myself, gosh, should I just say, I want to give me all of it? Give me the depth of grief and the breadth of pain. Give me all of it so that I know, because otherwise I wouldn't. I do feel that experience might be the only true teacher. Um, and so we have our experiences here. Some of them are blissful and some of them are right down tragic.
Hmm.
And yet it's all love. That's what I was feeling in those divine arms. This is all love. This is all for you, not to you. And I didn't do it to you. You chose it, and I loved you enough to support it all. Um,
That phrase
yeah,
you mentioned there is not to you, it's for you. I had that same experience when I interviewed Ingrid Honkeler, and you probably know her.
I do know Ingrid. Yeah, beautiful soul. Beautiful
Yeah, and
soul.
that's the first time I heard that phrase, and it's stuck with me ever since. And then it plays into the whole planned lives scenario, doesn't it? Which seems to be holding sway with all the people I speak to in the NDE arena.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean everyone has different experiences. I was on, gosh, just last week with Eben Alexander, a Harvard trained neurosurgeon, and he had a near-death experience and he was riding on the back of a butterfly. Much different. I was in a meadow. He was on a butterfly. Every experience is different. And yet, his story is this beautiful woman that was on the butterfly with him. And as the whole thing plays out, if you've read Proof of Heaven, and then Eben was adopted and he didn't know he had siblings. He didn't find any of this out till after his near-death experience. And in that process, he found out that his sister, his younger sister, had passed away from cancer. He eventually met his birth family and they produced the picture of his sister who had passed, and that was the woman on the butterfly with him. I mean, it blew his mind. I mean, from an analytical, clinical, he's like, I could not make that up because I didn't even know, but his soul knew. If one embraces the existence of a soul, and certainly I do because I've experienced it, and and yet we don't have to die. Here's it's not like we have to die to experience these things. I, coming home from the hospital, I'll tell this briefly, but I still had a surviving son. That was the whole reason that I mean, I was going to go home and raise my son. He was only 7. He was a child and he saw me in the hospital, but I was going to be going home. And it was so overwhelming. And I wasn't even going to my own house. I had to go stay at my brother's house, and there was going to be home health and physical therapy and all these things. And they'd put a hospital bed in. They were ready to receive me, and they had taken my son in as if he was one of their own. I mean, my brothers were amazing. But anyway, here I was going home. How is he going to accept this? How is this going to be for him? I mean, I was the rough and tumble dad, and now I'm in a wheelchair. I've got this colostomy bag. One of my legs is cut off. I mean, I worried. And as my brothers took me home that day, they had to literally lift me into the wheelchair and all. And we arrived at the house, and there was Spencer, my 7-year-old, like looking out the window, watching as his uncles, my brothers lifted me up and put me in the wheelchair. And I could see him looking out the window, and I began to make my way toward the house. And he came running out the front door and he ran toward me. And then he ran right past me. And I thought, this is too much, too much. And I began to navigate. They'd build a ramp. They were emphatic. I'd be independent. I get into the house myself. And so I was navigating around this ramp, and I just turned to see where my son Spencer had gone. And that's when I saw he had actually run across the street and he began knocking on all the neighbors' doors. And he was shouting, come out, come out. My dad has made it home. Come see my dad. And I realized, wow, my judgments are certainly not his judgments. And as he ran about and knocked on all the neighbors, he then threw himself on my lap, which just about killed me because I still had all the sutures
Oh
and
God,
everything,
yeah.
you know. But I'm holding my son. I mean, here I am in this realm, in a wheelchair, all banged up, and I'm holding my surviving son. And that was no less divine than being in the other realm, holding my son that passed. I mean, suddenly heaven was right here. I mean, there was nowhere to go or nothing to become. It was to be, just be perfect in that moment and experience that love. I mean, I saw a funny comic strip the other day. It was someone at the pearly gates, if this is from a religious connotation, but he's at the pearly gates, and there's St. Peter letting him in. But the man coming in to the pearly gates is asked, how was your visit to heaven? You know,
Oh, I
meaning
see.
here.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, meaning here. And sometimes now, I'll look at a sunset or see the flowers coming out in the spring or a snowstorm in the winter, and it's like, wow, maybe heaven is right here. Maybe this is it. And I mean, that's a bit of a rant, but But yeah, we're so interested about the bigger plan, the greater plan. What was it like to be out of the body? And for me now, it's kind of like, gosh, maybe I get to focus on what it's like to be in the body. What is pain teaching me? What is the experience here, and how am I embracing the gift of this life beyond the wonder of what comes after?
Yes, exactly. Embrace the now, I think is
Right. Yeah.
a decent phrase. Now, I want to get into, before we go back into some more etheric
Okay.
posturing and theorizing, I want to ask you about your surgeries and your leg, if you don't mind.
Oh, very, very open. Go ahead.
Obviously,
Absolutely.
you mentioned colostomy bag. That's clearly a gross thing in any respect. No, I imagine nobody wants that. A friend of mine had it recently.
Yeah, yeah.
What goes on there, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, where my intestines were ruptured, they had to take intestines out, and the colostomy bag is simply it's an external bag to catch the waste, the feces. Now, you've also got to imagine, and this was part of the horrible process, and I mean, yeah, details, more information than you want to know. This arm's in a sling. I'm immobile. I have one hand. How am I going to change and clean all that stuff? Now, for me, and I'm so grateful, they were able to take the colostomy down. They were able to reconnect my intestines, and I healed beautifully. I mean, and when I talk about gratitude, between
Mm.
us guys, when I went to the bathroom the natural way for the first time, I'm like, hallelujah,
Yeah.
yes. And yet there was a lesson in that too. I'll share this. The colostomy nurse that was assisting me, and I would say to her, "Oh, I'm so sorry. That's so disgusting. How can I. And she finally shared at one point. She said, "Jeff, I have a colostomy bag, and it's permanent. Please don't say it's so disgusting. Please don't be ashamed and embarrassed. It doesn't make me feel any better about my situation." She said, "They're going to take yours down, and there's a very high percentage you're going to be fine." And I learned in that too. I thought, wow, this
Mm.
beautiful woman. And here I've been saying, oh, that's so disgusting. That's so gross. I'm so sorry. And I had no idea, that that was her circumstance. But yeah, the colostomy bag. So they took that down. I don't deal with that anymore. I'm grateful. It's awesome. But I have this deep compassion for anyone who does. I've been there. I've done that.
Yeah, it's not something that I would relish going through, and I don't imagine anyone would say, yes, I'll volunteer for that. But, it's that one thing in your mind where there's a dignity involved, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah,
Yes.
which I imagine is not the best thing in the world. Obviously, regarding your leg that had to be amputated, do
Hmm.
you experience phantom limb syndrome?
Yes, and severely. I mean, it is so painful. And I mean, I'm cursing, I'm swearing, I'm rolling about. It is so pain. It feels like somebody's got battery cables hooked onto my lower leg, which is not there, and in addition to that, they've got a flathead screwdriver in the shin. I mean, it is excruciating pain. And it's been 28 years. Now, it doesn't happen often. And oddly enough, it rarely happens when I'm wearing the prosthetic limb. And I do, I wear it all day. I put it on in the morning, I go all day, and I take it off to go to bed. But there are times when that phantom pain is so severe that it it's dreadful. It's
Yeah, I
dreadful.
imagine.
I have a nephew who is he had some training in physical therapy. Here's the thing that assists with it. I have I have a mirror that you would hang on a closet door, kind of a full length thing, but it's small enough I can take it and maneuver it. This is bizarre, but it works. If I sit on the floor and put the mirror between my legs so that the mirror is facing the good leg, and therefore my eyes see two legs in the mirror. And if I rub the good leg at the lower leg and massage it and look in the mirror as if I'm rubbing the leg that's gone, somehow the nervous system and the brain says, oh, yes, thank you. And it subsides the pain somewhat. Sometimes it doesn't, but it's really funny how the brain and those electro memories, I suppose, are happening. That's been the one thing that's assisted that. But yes, I do experience phantom pain. It's excruciating. I had a different nurse that says, "Well, just be glad. That's just your spirit telling you the leg's still there, and it remembers the hurt." Yeah.
Which is my next question on it, actually, which is to say, do we put it down to the body's nerves and the brain thinking that the leg is still there because the nerves are sort of like messed up a bit in the remaining part of the leg? Or is there part of it that could be because our light body or our astral body cannot be severed and therefore it's somehow cross wired? Do you know what I mean?
This is, I embrace that. You're speaking my language. I had the hospital. I had a different nurse in the hospital that would come in after hours, two of them actually, and I didn't know anything about Reiki or energy work. They would say, "Can we work on you?" And one would get up behind my head, the other one would get down on my one foot that was there. But then I would see them as if they were working on the leg that was gone. And I thought, are these, but I felt better. And I, so I would ask them, "What are you doing?" And they simply said, "Energy work. Don't tell the doctors." They were so kind. Now, I think more of that's being embraced, and you could call it Eastern medicine, I suppose. But yes, our light body, our energetic body is there, and it's probably grieving the loss of the physical body.
Mm.
Therefore, the pain, maybe, I don't know. Maybe the nerve pain is just nerves physically. But yeah, I was so intrigued. I became a Reiki. I studied Reiki myself. I became a Reiki master. I don't necessarily practice it except with family and friends, but I believe that the light body cannot be severed. Our souls are eternal. That nothing can be done to them that would damage them. We have the experiences in the body, but nothing that I've done or that's been done to me will change the fact that I am eternal being of light and a divine being of light. Regardless of what I experience here, that's the truth of who I am. And how that relates to phantom pain, I'm not sure. But
But
yeah,
it does. Yeah.
I will have crazy sensations. I'll be walking around on a prosthetic limb thinking, "Wow, my third toe over has an itch on it," you know,
Yeah, that's
or
weird.
I've had the sensation of it feels like there's a stone in my shoe. Well, there's no foot there. How would I know? But that's very interesting stuff.
That is amazing because you wouldn't put that sort of sensation with it, would you? I mean, I get the pain thing
Yeah,
because you can think severed nerves, but when you think, oh, there's something touching a toe,
yeah,
that suggests something completely different.
yeah, yeah. That's why I bring it up. It's not always
Mm.
pain. It is a normal sensation, like my toe itches.
Hey, I imagine you've tested this, right? You're walking without your prosthetic leg. Maybe I don't know how you do it, but
I use crutches. I use crutches
okay.
when I.
So when you're using crutches, could you put your missing leg over a stone, stand there, and see if you feel that stone?
I've not tried that. I've not tried that. I mean, that's a very interesting thing. I have had sensations during massage and during Reiki. And I work with a practitioner that does frequency therapy. I mean, everything from crystal sound bowls to ancient Tibetan sound bowls and the frequency, but I have felt sensations as if my leg is there, you know. But I haven't tried standing over a stone. And usually when I do that, I don't have the prosthetic on. I take it off and I get on the table and they do their work. But I have had many situations where it's like, wow, I can feel the leg. I feel like I
Yeah.
can wiggle toes. That it is there, just not physically,
Yes.
man. Yeah.
Also,
Yeah.
obviously, the waves of sound or whatever it is interacting with the energy of the leg or whatever it is. I don't understand the science of it, but yeah, that's how I imagined it would work. You know, when the Reiki people were working on your missing leg,
Right,
were
right.
they going over it as if it was there? I.e., they weren't pushing through and then going the other side by pushing through the leg. They were like working around the leg shape.
Yeah, they would work around it as if it was
Mm,
there. Yeah.
amazing, cool. Now, I think I touched on the event was planned because we said we think our lives are planned out, and then part of that was who planned it and for what reason. And
Mm.
I think we said it was us for experience.
Yeah, and the experience equals the expansion of our soul, with which equals the bottom line, love. I mean, maybe we come here to experience what we're not, to further embrace who and what we are. And I have grappled with these things, and that's where I've landed. I came here to experience all of it. I mean, and even if you take a step back, I've mentioned my Christian upbringing. Well, you could look at someone like Jesus, who, gosh, he's being hauled off and crucified, and he says, biblically, if you want to embrace biblical, as any kind of truth, but he says, for this reason, for this cause came I into the world. And maybe an enlightened being, an ascended master would get that. I mean, even now when things happen and I don't like them and it's not what I planned, unless I did.
Yeah, there.
I say to myself, oh, well, for this cause came I into the world. For that's why I'm here, is to experience all of it. And therefore all of it must come from love. I'm never being punished. I haven't done anything wrong and I'm paying my, penance. It's all love, even the pain. I laugh and say, pain is my most frequent lover. She shows up every day and reminds me I'm alive. And we can learn that. No, I can laugh about it, and there's days I don't. But yeah, I really feel that we planned it for us, and the universe supports it. It holds the context for us to have our experience without judgment, without comparison. Now, I've thought about that, and it's all, well, but what about this? Somebody murders somebody or they damage a child. I mean, that's there's got to be, that can't be in divine order. And I still grapple with those things sometimes, unless that's a soul contract that expands the soul in some way. I'm not justifying any of that by any stretch. Um, but yeah, it's weird. I love your word. It's weird. I don't know. I've had this profound experience, and I've continued to have dreams, and things happen, and I'll even call them visitations. I still don't have all the answers. And I don't know that I ever will.
Well done for saying that, by the way. I don't,
Yeah.
and I know you would say that because you're clearly an honest fella. But I never trust the people who know the answer to everything. Do you think? Well, they're just clearly making it up off the top of their head.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I've changed my mind. I mean, throughout my life, I've certainly changed the way I feel about something based on experience. And I've decided what works for me and what doesn't work. The game is, I'm not going to place judgment on it. That doesn't work for me. I don't want to live that way. I'm going to move over here. Oh, this does work. I'll choose that. But the way I choose doesn't have to be the way everybody else chooses. We each have our own journey, and we each decide what works or what doesn't work based on our experience. And that's probably the what the universe holds. Many may call it chaos, and perhaps it's divine order.
Here's the next question then that pushes a bit deeper into this.
Okay.
What do you think near death experiences are for? What's their purpose? Because if we've planned out an existence, why does it that we seem to need an intervention?
Yeah. That is a great question. I love your questions. These may be the
Okay.
best questions I've been asked. I mean, my son, a 7-year-old child, he didn't have a near death experience. He didn't have a mystical thing. He didn't have a visitation or a dream. I mean, when he was a young man, probably 20, or so, I mean, he was in college, he was grown. He said to me, Dad, I don't get it. By that time I was talking about my experience. And he's like, you got to visit mom, you got to hug her and say goodbye, you got to see Griffin. And he was somewhat upset. He's like, look, maybe you're deceived in some crazy way. Maybe it was a hallucination. Or maybe you're making it up. He said, because I've begged as a child. I was a little boy. And this thing you call God, he said, I beat my knuckles bloody on that door asking. I just wanted to see my mom, and I got nothing. And he said, if there's a greater power or some plan to this whole thing, it doesn't care about me. And he was somewhat emotional. He's like, Dad, I was a little boy and I got nothing. Now this, this was one of those things where it drove me back. And I'm like, okay, look, higher power, give him something. I mean, I'll give it all away. Just give him some light, give him something. And this was an interesting experience. I think my upbringing is always there. What came to me in a very powerful way, I could say God answered me that night and said, why are you judging your son? Judge not that you be not judged. And I'm like, whoa, I'm not judging him. It's like, yes, you are. You think that your experience is better. You think that you having had these out of body and mystical things happen is going to enlighten him more. Don't you know I've got him? Don't you know that he's having the perfect experience for the expansion of his soul? And you had the perfect experience for the expansion of your soul, and they don't have to look alike. Your job's to love him. Your job is to love. And so, why do some have a near death experience? What is the purpose? It's probably the only thing I had to hold on to get me through. Now, as I've shared it, as I've talked to people, I mean, I never intended to share it publicly. I wasn't going to write a book or any of that. That was spiritual as well. I mean, that came and I was told specifically by Spirit, share your experience and others will heal. Oh, okay. Well, then if it's not about me and if it's about healing, I can step into that. Um, More and more people are having near death experiences and they're being reported. When you said millions, it's like even with the medical advances we have now, people are surviving things that, 50 years ago they would have just died of. And they have this universal experience. And when I say universal, the universal things about it are probably the unconditional love they experience. And then there's often entities, spirits of deceased loved ones who have passed that are part of this experience. Maybe the whole point of the near-death experience is so that we begin to open up, to wake up, to take a look at, even from a medical perspective, wow, is there more to us than just the body? Is there something after? If people are having this experience, I mean, what, in a court of law, if you've got 4 or 5 witnesses, then that's a credible case. And there's millions of witnesses saying, wow, I didn't even believe in this. And it happened. Now, I was a believer beforehand, but there's many that were not. And it's changed their whole perspective of how they feel. So I'm not going to, propagate a reason. Some people do, some people don't, but it's worth taking a look at. Why is there so much of this happening now? Why is it so prevalent? If the overlying lesson is love and connection and oneness, well, boy, certainly humanity can be informed by that. What if we leaned into love? What if we stepped away from fear? What if we let judgments go? And gosh, what a different world we would have. There wouldn't be wars and competing over resources and all the things that happen. We would literally, well, heaven might be right here if we chose to step up and create it, to lean into that whole notion of the near-death experience of oneness and love and connection and unity and embracing our uniqueness, the differences, rather than judging them.
So it sounds like a nudge, if you will, from the bigger whatever to push us back towards love then. Which then begs, or at least suggests, that we've been on the wrong path for a little while.
I would agree with that. Yes, I mean, we free will. I mean, I now say there's only one cosmic law, and that's free will. We get
Choice.
to choose.
Yes, choice.
Choice. We get to choose.
A very key word that it's been sitting with me for a long time, because I had issues with my dad and he would not make a choice. He had the option to choose, but he wouldn't, and that ended in his demise, unfortunately.
Wow.
It's a powerful word, choice, and I think more people should look at their choices better. But, who am I to tell people how to live? But everyone has their own choice. Now, obviously, you mentioned your book throughout this conversation. You wrote the book knowing, which is another word that highly resonates with me, right? I've had
Mm.
experience where I don't understand where it comes from, but I know something.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Very
call that an
strange phenomena.
yeah, an inner knowing. You
Mm,
just know. Now, it's funny. I laugh as I've become old and gray haired. It's like, gosh, maybe I don't know anything, but I'm very comfortable not knowing. But yeah, the title of the book, Knowing, came from that. Wow. I just, I know what I know, and no one can take that away. And yeah, the inner knowing.
the inner
It's like,
knowing, yeah, very powerful.
yeah.
Now, I think you alluded to this again a few minutes ago that something drove you to write down your experiences to tell the story. What was that thing that told you?
It's so, I'll give you the whole story. And once again, I'm probably thick-headed. I mean, I was angry that Tamara was going to go hug her parents. We wanted to get on the road. And even after all the experiences, I didn't want to share the experience. I did not want people to think I was crazy. I didn't want them to think I thought I was special in some way, but I knew I had had the experience. I had a neighbor that I trusted, and we were having a conversation, and she said, "Something happened to you, didn't it?" And I said, "Yes, but I don't talk about it." And she said, "Well, I'm coming over tonight, and you're going to talk about it. I want to know what happened." And I mean, I trusted her. She's still a dear friend of the family, and she came over, and through tears, shared what I had experienced. And she said, "You've got to talk to my friend at the university. He studies all this." And it was a fellow named Robert Little, and they have a little group, and I went and talked to them, and we were crying, and he said, "Please come share this with our group." And I said, "No, I don't want to talk about this publicly. It's very private." And he was, then there's many researchers that they're not interested. They have no agenda. They just want to know, what does a Buddhist experience as opposed to an atheist, as opposed to a Christian, as opposed to a Hindu. I mean, they're looking for the commonalities, or just researching others. But when I spoke to him, he said, "Please come talk to our group." And I said, "No, not in a public setting." And he said, "It's not a large group." And oddly enough, it was the Salt Lake City chapter of IANS, the International Association for Near Death Studies. And it wasn't a big gathering. I finally acquiesced. He said to me, he said, "Look, people are suffering." He said, "They're in late stage cancer, they're facing death themselves. Many people there have had loved ones pass. We even have a group of goth teenagers that come, and they're obsessed with death." He said, "Come and share your story." And I acquiesced to that, and I said I would. And again, through tears early on. I mean, if we'd have talked, 15 years ago, I'd just cry. I couldn't talk about it. But I got through the speech, and a fellow came up, and he was a publisher. He's like, "You're going to write a book." And I said, "No, I'm not." And this was a Friday, and he talked to the organizers, and he got my contact information, and there was a book contract in my email Monday morning. So, I mean, I'm the accidental author, like, if there's any accidents, but it was not my choice to do this. But here was this contract, and it drove me to go back to the scene of the accident. I literally went back to the scene of the accident, which I had avoided. I'd driven by it, but I went, and I stopped. I spent half the day there. And again, I pray, I asked, and it was a conversation. I used to say eloquent prayers before the accident. Now I just listen, but I did have this question. I'm like, "Look, there's a book contract in my email. I don't want to do it." Here was the barrier. Number one, I didn't want people to think I was crazy. Number two, I didn't want people to think I thought I was special. Here was this book contract. Gosh, could I collect a royalty check based on the catastrophe that took half my family, and I was driving the car? I mean, this was a big one for me. What does that look like? Anyway, as I went to my maker, and whatever name you want to call that, I asked the question, and that came back to me, and that's when I was told, "Share your experience, and others will heal." Okay, it's not about me. I can share the experience, and I didn't fancy myself a writer. I would go and write at night, and I simply was sharing the experience. I convinced myself that I would just say it as if I was telling my family what happened. And I also thought, what the hell? My mom will buy a copy. Who cares? It's not gonna, nobody's gonna read this thing. That's how I kind of got through it. But as the book released, yeah, gosh, it hit number 3 on Amazon in the first week or so, and in the category anyway. And then, it changed my whole life. And suddenly I was springboarded into a place where I would talk about it. Um, and it was interesting. The first letter I got from the publishing company, it was in their letterhead, and I thought, oh gosh, is this that royalty check? What does this look like? I opened it up, and it was this little 3x5 card with hen scratch on it, little, tiny writing in pencil. And I thought, what is this? I turned it over and I realized it was jail mail. That's how they monitor the mail. So they can see plainly what inmates are writing, and the only address he had was the publishing company on the back of the book. And so he had sent this jail mail to the publisher, and the publisher forwarded it to me. I turned it back over and began to read the hen scratch, and here was this man who was in prison, and he had gotten a hold. He said, I lost my family too. They didn't die. They left me. I did a terrible thing. I'm paying my debt to society. And, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, the book changed me. Your book convinced me that I am loved. And I'm going to be a much better person coming out of here than I was going in. And I'm weeping. I'm like, well, this is the guy. That's the one. He's the, and I've gotten so many. I mean, there's been so many emails and cards and letters and what have you, but I realized that is the royalty check. If it allows someone else to heal, that's and I don't know if anybody gets rich as an author unless it's J.K. Rowling, or there's something that goes really, and what a lovely, talented soul. I'm just saying, yeah, it wasn't about that. It was about how people heal, how they move forward, and maybe that's part of the near death experience too. That's more
Yeah,
information
that's
than
another
say I
good
just.
phrase you've come out with, by the way. That the paycheck perhaps is the affecting of other people's lives for the better. I that's good, very very good. In fact,
Thank you.
do you consider the book to be a stepping stone in your life to get you to a place that you needed to be?
Well, yes, I do. Sometimes even now I think, oh man, I wrote that book. um, I've gotten angry mail too. How dare you say there's no judgment? How dare you? You should be professing, some religious agenda. And I'm like, but that wasn't my experience.
Hmm.
I was told share your experience specifically. It wasn't write a book. It wasn't, put an agenda in it. It wasn't weave it in with, dogma of any kind. It was simply share the experience. But that's those are not as common as the letters of gratitude. Um, but yes, I would have never been public. We wouldn't be having this podcast had I not
True.
written the book. And who knows how many people will listen to this. And the thing is, I don't care how many. That's the funny thing. It's the right one. The right that the right person gets the message they're looking for, they're seeking. And wow, if someone hears something or reads the book and doesn't take their life tomorrow, and I have no judgment of that. I wanted to commit suicide while in the hospital. That's a whole nother
Hmm.
story. It's all in the book. But maybe one person will be better to another person, and that's a win. That's a win.
Oh, definitely a win. I love that. I have some other questions. So let's start with this one. Have you seen or heard from your wife and son since the experiences you've already mentioned? There have been other scenarios.
Yes. Oh, I have. And it's interesting because I longed for that, and I didn't and I wouldn't. There's been a couple of occasions. I'll be brief about this too.
Sure.
I tend to I give you such long answers to
No,
very
that's
short,
okay.
poignant questions. My There was a time when I was really struggling after the accident. It was probably I don't know, 8, 10 years after that accident. And I had made some choices. It didn't work. And I was really in the depths of the dark night of the soul, if you will. And I went to bed actually thinking, hey, well, maybe tomorrow I'll end it. Gosh, I know what's waiting for me. Why don't I just check out? I mean, I think everyone has those thoughts. Quite honestly, I probably don't have the guts to do it, but I was very depressed. I was having suicidal thoughts. I went to bed in this deep, dark night of the soul, and I had a dream while I slept. My deceased wife came to me, and she came so joyfully. She was dancing, and she put her arms around my neck and she danced around me, and then she kissed me on the face, which I thought was interesting. And then she pulled back and she verbally said to me, she said, all that exists here is wisdom. But then I looked into her eyes and that telepathic communication started. And what she communicated was it doesn't matter what you did or what you didn't do. All that matters is what are you learning? It was almost remnant of being in the arms of the divine. All that exists here is wisdom. And again, my upbringing, I remember a verse saying something to the extent of cast your burdens on the Lord and they will be made light. And I always thought, oh, easier to carry, less heavy. But I'm looking and it's like, no, everything that happens will be illuminated into wisdom. It will be light. You'll be filled with light. You'll have light around you, no matter what it is. And so that was a time that she showed up very prominently, in a
When
very,
she said, here is wisdom, did she mean earth
I think
or
she
did she
meant,
mean there?
she said, all that exists here. Now, if she's in another realm, maybe it's there. But I love the way you meld those. I mean, maybe there's not two realms. Maybe it's all right here. Maybe it's one realm. Maybe I've got to quit speaking in duality. Maybe this is it. But I mean, but yeah, she's not here. I mean, the arms that held me are there's no physicality. It's a spirit thing. And wow, my son has come in dreams. One was an interesting lucid dream. I was somewhat awake, and these are kind of, I've got to set the context. That it was strange because suddenly I found myself very, very much so sitting in the front seat of my father's old pickup truck. I mean, years ago. I was a little boy. In fact, I was a child. And there I was, and I looked down, and I was wearing a red corduroy jumpsuit that the snaps go up the inner thighs like a toddler would wear, and I'm wearing these toddler shoes, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I remember this. I remember the smell of the truck. I remember that I hated that jumpsuit. I mean, I was having this vivid memory of my childhood. And we grew up on a farm, and I was in the truck, and the cows were eating. There was feed in the back of the truck, and the truck was kind of swaying at the weight of the cows pulling at the feed. And became scared. And in this memory, which was like a dream, I'll call it a vision, my dad came, he shooed away the cows, he got in the truck, and he comforted me as a child because I was frightened of what the cows were doing. I thought, I remember this. I remember this like yesterday. Gosh, I couldn't have been any older then. And then it came in 14 months. And that's the age Griffin was when he passed. And then the truck, the jumpsuit, everything went away, and I was my current self. And I standing, 10 yards away was this magnificent young man. Tall, strong, but I knew at a glance that's Griffin. And I wanted to race to him. I wanted to go to him. I wanted to get to this was my son. And I wasn't able to get to him, but I could see him. And again, there was this nonverbal communication. And what he communicated was, Dad, I wanted you to remember that in your life because I'll never forget being your little boy. And I'll always remember having you as my dad, even if it was short. And at that point, I mean, wild horses couldn't have held me back. I was able to make my way to him, and I embraced him, and he was taller and stronger than me. It was awesome. But then he spoke to me and he said, Dad, I have a message. And I thought, what? But gosh, a message from my boy from the other side, and look at him. He's full grown and magnificent. And he leaned into my ear and he said, I love you and I'm proud of you. Um, and I thought, well, what greater message could there be? I mean, is he going to tell me to buy Apple stock? I mean, what's the message, right?
But there is
Um,
no more than that, is there? I think that's it.
that's it, and that's what I realized after the fact. So they have come in dreams and visions and in beautiful ways. And yes, I have a vivid imagination, but these things are so real to me. This is what I've grappled with. Wow, did I imagine that? Or did that really happen? And it's like, no, that really happened. Like that was real.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know the experience you're having. Not that precise one, clearly, but I've had a couple of lucid dream experiences in my life, and I would say the best way of describing them is an uber clarity that is nothing like any other creativity that we can come up with.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Uber clarity. Yeah. And so I've embraced those as real. And the messages, all there is wisdom, you know, wow, I love you and I'm proud of you. I'm watching. And this was just before the book came out, quite honestly. It was not long before the book came out. And maybe that was wind in my sails to say, okay, here we go. If
Mm.
there's contribution to make, then this is it.
It begs another question as well with the whole spirit thing. Obviously, your son unfortunately passed at 14 months and now it has been seen as an older
Yeah.
person. What's that about?
I
That
don't know.
growth?
I don't know. I mean, I could theorize. I was 33 when the accident happened, so suppose I was in my prime, or I'm in my prime now. I don't know, but when I was out of the body, when I was out of the body, that experience that felt so in the body, the energy of the ground beneath my feet and the ability to run, and maybe our souls are always in their prime. Maybe our souls are always young and vibrant and full grown. And and we say, well, they're an old soul. My son Spencer, my surviving son, he's an old soul, but maybe in the ethereal realms, we're all young and vibrant and full grown, and I'm 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 theorizing. Don't
That's
know.
okay. I like theorizing. It
Would
expands the
be
minds even more, doesn't it?
Yeah, that would be lovely. That would be lovely if we all were young and vibrant and in our perfect top-notch condition. That would be
Yeah.
cool.
I haven't been in my top-notch condition for many a year.
Yeah, it's
Football
been
has
a long
buggered me
time.
up.
It's been a long time for me. I once upon a time when I was an athlete, I was in great shape, but not so much since.
Were you a good athlete?
I was a good athlete. Yeah, I played collegiate Division I football.
Oh,
I was
cool.
I was fast. I in high school I wrestled and played football and ran track, and sports was my thing. I mean, baseball was my first love, the Great American, baseball. So yeah, I loved sports. I was a good athlete, and yeah, it actually took me to school. I mean, here in the States, it's a scholarship. Your scholarship to play on the sports team, and that covers the expense for school and housing and other things. So it was awesome. That's what got me off the farm. Otherwise, I still might be on the farm. I've gone back to the farm, but yeah, I was a good athlete
So
back
you
in
could
the
have had
day.
two different lives here, couldn't you? Not only the sports star, so to speak, a sports life, but also the other one you just mentioned that I've literally just forgotten, a farmer. Yeah, you could have been.
I mean, there's these sliding doors. Like, which one do we walk through? Which one do we go through? And I do embrace there are no accidents. We have choice, but there's no accidents. We experience what we experience. We create what will expand our soul. And it's a beautiful thing. It's an adventure. It's a great adventure.
Love's Great Adventure by Ultravox. That's one of their themes for their songs. Now, before we enter the Koit zone and then wrap up, I do want to spend a little bit of time on a bit more theorizing, if that's okay with you. So, in a section I
I
call
love
the
it.
bigger picture.
I love it. Yes.
So, if you could explain or indeed draw it, or however you want to get this across, how would you conceptualize or put on paper how the universe and all the realms work? That's an impossible question because it's so big, but
Yeah.
is there a way you could explain it?
If I were to explain it, they all work on the premise of love. They all work in divine order. I mean, God is love. If you want to go back into the third dimensional, things that we've read or heard, everything operates in divine order, and divine order is love. Now, within love, there's power, there's also wisdom. But I've come to a place where I just ask myself, what would love do? What would love do in this circumstance? And the biggest thing is self love. What would love do for me? How can I love and support myself? I think on the bigger scale, it operates in order. We think it's chaos sometimes, but it may not be falling apart. It might be falling into place. Love governs all of it. If there's governing, I suppose we choose. And when we choose love, it falls into alignment. And when we don't, it doesn't. But yeah, the bigger picture, I would say everything operates in divine order, which is love.
I like that. Now I'm going to push on that a little bit because is that the power behind the planes of existence? Or is that the planes of existence? Just love is the plane of existence.
Hmm.
I'm
You know,
trying to
that's
work. What I'm trying to work at is if this is 3D Earth, is that heaven? Is that the next dimension? Is that how would you conceptualize?
Oh, this is a beautiful question. And something else comes up for me as you ask it. Gosh, what if it all operates on choice? What if I'm saying, oh, it all operates on love? Well, what if it operates on choice? And in choosing love, we're in alignment. Otherwise, it's not. Um, because love would not force, love would not demand, love would not control. Love would offer choice. I'm just making this up as we go, but gosh, maybe it all operates on choice. And
Yeah.
the game is to choose love. I don't know. It's a great
Well,
question. Awesome
it's.
question.
I know it's an impossible one to answer because who knows? We're just this
But
meat sack, aren't we? With power inside it. I don't know, but I love to ask that question because everyone gives a different response.
yeah, it's a great question. Keep asking it. I mean, gosh, if everyone asked themselves that question, even like what governs me? What is the order to me in my existence? What is my motivational power? What is the thing that drives me to do what I do? That's a
Yeah,
great.
and what is this around us? I mean, we alluded to earlier. Is it a matrix? Is it a game? I think from where you're going with it, this is a school of some
Yep.
sort to
Mhm.
understand life itself and the power of love, to quote another song. Is that right? Do you think?
That aligns with me. Yes. In fact, I wonder. I used to believe, well, there's a God and maybe a God of judgment, maybe a God of benevolence, and life is a test to prove my worth, to see if I am worthy of that love, um, or of that reward. If one wants to, heaven, hell. I don't necessarily embrace a hell. I think we go through our own hell here. Um, in my experience, I realized, wow, that higher power knows me perfectly. I have nothing to prove to the higher power. It's I that don't know myself. you know, And so in all the choice, it's not to prove or to show a higher power. It's all to experience myself, observing myself, being myself, and what my choices and what my decisions create in my life. And yeah, so maybe there's nothing to prove or nothing to do. It's simply to be
Yeah,
me,
just to be.
just to be me and to make the choices and experience the results of my choices. And then at the end of the day, then, we've learned. And
Yeah.
it sounds simple, but yeah, school,
School. I
school.
agree. That's where I go with it. It's learning, isn't it? Last question here again before the Koit zone. Is suffering a part of this plane of existence forever? And I'm going to caveat that with this because earlier I sort of alluded and you mentioned it as well. It's almost like interventions of NDEs are to nudge us back towards love.
Mhm.
Are we on a path to wiping out suffering, or does it have to be there for growth?
These are such great questions. I would love to eliminate suffering. Gosh, in my heart of hearts, if everyone could be fed and housed and clothed and healthy and loved, that would be awesome. Will we ever end it? Well, maybe that's the game. Maybe that's the choice we're playing. In the same breath, and I realize I'm kind of speaking out both sides of my mouth sometimes. Wow, I've grown more in my deepest sorrow than probably in my highest bliss. I've grown more. I enjoy the bliss. Give me the bliss. I'll take that. And I've learned in bliss as well, but it's the opposition. It's the difference. I mean, how would I know light if I didn't experience darkness? How would I know darkness if I didn't experience? It's the opposition. It's the experiencing all of it that defines one another. Um, is it necessary? Perhaps the duality is necessary. Perhaps we must have sorrow to know joy. Um, is it forevermore? I don't know. I don't know. I would love to say, wow, let's alleviate suffering. But would there be growth without it? It's a profound question. It's a
Yes.
profound, and I'm divided. I'd love to alleviate suffering. Wow, I've sure grown from the things I've suffered. you know, yeah.
Yeah, that's an unfortunate side effect, but is it a necessary thing? Isn't that the point of it? Yeah.
Well, no one has to have a near-death experience to connect to the divine. I mean, nobody has to die to, I mean, I think it could happen sitting on a rock by the river, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, I'm changed, I'm different, I'm enlightened. So it's probably part of the game. It's probably part of the matrix, the suffering, the choice, the learning. I wonder, if we go to another realm and there's no suffering, it's all just light and love, are we going to say, you know what? Put me back in the game, coach. I want to taste the grass and get hit in the head again. Let's do that. Let's have the whole experience. This is a great question. I want to chew on that one, but I
Yeah.
love it. And there's two answers, and they seem to oppose each other from my perspective.
No, that's fair. I think that's probably going to be the right answer anyway, that you can't have the dark without the light and you can't experience the light without the dark, etc. And I'm
Mm.
with that. I go with that philosophy. Um, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you this question. So I'm gonna lob it in now. Are there any um, aspects of your experiences that you've never told before, that you've held back for any reasons? And you don't have to tell me what they are, but have you held something back because? And I'll leave it at that.
That it's a great question. I say I have no secrets. I'll answer anything. There are certain things that are so sacred and just for me. I just hold them for me. There's the old film Saving Private Ryan, and there was a scene in that where they're listening to a French singer, and they're talking about memories, and they're all sharing their memories. And they ask the captain, which was played by Tom Hanks, and he's talking about how he's talking about his wife cutting roses in their garden, and he's asked a question, and he said, "Well, that's just for me." And it's not a matter of withholding anything, but there are certain aspects and there are certain things that are just for me. They're so sacred, they're so pure, and they're not to change the world. They're to change and ignite my soul. And I keep them. Yeah, I still hold on to certain things. And thank you for asking. And thank you for your honesty and allowing me to be honest. There's things I don't share, and that's okay.
That is exactly okay, and thank you again for your honesty there. I think it's now time that we entered the Koit Zone. Koit Zone! So
Okay.
these are just flippant, random, silly questions. Mixed
Okay,
in with
let's
some
do
generic
it.
stuff. Okay, so let's
Do it.
start with an easy, obvious one. What is your favorite film, if you have one? Favorite movie?
Oh, wow. I love film. I love cinema. There's a film that I could watch over and over again. I mentioned Saving Private Ryan. That's a good one. The one I could watch over and over again is a Coen Brothers film. It's called "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?" It
I
just
know the
makes
one
me
you mean.
laugh. It just makes me laugh. There's an old, I would call it it's a romantic thing. The City of Angels, where the angel chooses to, it's played by, oh gosh, I'm having a brain cloud. It's Meg Ryan and Nicolas Cage. And Nicolas
Yes.
Cage, is an angel, and he decides to come have the experience. And it's an old film. It came out in the 90s. Still a favorite, not because of the film, but because of the message. Um, yeah,
Yeah, it's a nice
yes,
film. I like that one as well. Good
yeah.
choices. What is the best time of day for you?
Oh, two times, sunrise and sunset. I work with the native indigenous people around here, some of them. And sunrise is when the light comes in, and I can look right in the sun. It's that early morning sun, and then at night when sunset, when the sky goes golden and purple. The indigenous culture says that's when Father Sky kisses Mother Earth on the forehead with the promise, I'll be back. You can count on me. And I love that. Those are my two sacred times. I attempt to be up at sunrise, and if I can, I will watch the sunset every day.
Wow. It's good that you're able to do that. I mean, obviously, some people are in locations where they can't see over a hill to see or whatever. Oh, no, I suppose you still can because it'll still set over the hill, won't it?
It's that over the
Silly thing.
mountain. Yeah, it goes behind the mountain at my place, but I love those two times a day. Absolute favorite time of day. Sunrise and
Excellent.
sunset.
Excellent. What piece of technology do you struggle with the most?
What piece of technology? I can never get the telly to work right. I mean, but I mean, AI is so interesting. I find it so useful, and sometimes kind of creepy. It's like, wow, how did it know that? Um, Struggle with technology. I mean, the iPhone. I do find myself sometimes scrolling and thinking, oh my gosh, I'm sitting here wasting time, or am I? I mean, I get insights, and I mean, there might be some meme, and I'm like, oh wow, I like that. Um, I don't know that I struggle with technology, except I never it never that I can never hook up the TV right. I can never get it to work. I mean, I can watch Netflix, and that's okay. Um,
No, that's fair. You said it. You struggle with your telly. My
yeah,
girlfriend has the same thing. She won't know how to switch the source, to watch different channels. So she
I
only
mean,
ever
I'm
watches Netflix.
a smart guy. I should be able to navigate this, but it's like, oh, I'll just watch what's on Netflix again. That's the only thing I can get to work.
There you go. Bang on. Um, which actor plays you in the film of your life?
Oh wow. Sean Penn. Let's go with Sean Penn.
Wow. I would have never guessed that one.
I don't know. I mean, I've been told I look like Sean Penn. I was also accused of being Robert De Niro in
De
the
Niro,
airport.
I was going to say you were closer to. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's probably visual. That's probably visual looks. Um, Yeah, gosh.
That's okay.
Yeah.
You went with Sean Penn. Your first
De Niro,
instinct is often the right
Sean
one.
Penn or De Niro? Yes, Sean Penn. All right, there we go.
Sean Penn. Is there a food which calls to you to eat loads of it?
Ooh, I love food. I do love food. I love fish. I'll eat any kind of fish. I love salmon. I love haddock. I love, you know, all of it. Yeah.
If it swims, you're eating it.
If it swims, I'll eat it. Yeah. If it swims, I'll eat it.
Quality. Um, are you artistic?
I am a creative director. This is my career. This is what I do for a living. I came up as a designer, art director, became a creative director, and now I'm working in entertainment. I was producing all kinds of value-based films. So there you go.
Amazing. I love. It's a weird thing, right? And I don't want this to sound all about me because it's not. But I write these questions randomly, right? But they seem to tend to fit for people. I find that an odd phenomenon as well.
Oh, I
How,
found that. I mean, you're asking questions that are so deep and insightful. But even are you creative? I've been called creative since I was in the second grade and used to draw on my desk. So yeah, I'm a creative person.
excellent. Is there a piece of music that brings you to tears?
Oh, wow. Yes, I love music. I love music. It's interesting. Anything from Claire de Lune, you know, to the Cowboy Junkies and 200 More Miles or Lost My Driving Wheel. I love music. I have a very eclectic taste, and it all depends on what mood I'm in. But I am often moved to tears by music, and it's the song on that day, and it may even come on the radio. That message from above is in the lyrics of some song I didn't even select, it just plays.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Is it a specific song, or are you just hearing the message in a song at that point?
In a song.
Yeah,
It
I get it.
yeah, it changes, but I love all music and I often cry in songs. There's not a go-to. I don't have a, oh, I'm going to listen to this when it makes me cry. I don't do that, but I cry when some song comes on or on an album that I wasn't even expecting. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Is there an animal or an insect that makes you go, "Ugh," like makes your skin crawl?
I don't like mice. Spiders, snakes, none of it bothers me. Gosh, I rode rodeo when I was young. I can do a bucking horse, and that doesn't frighten me. But a mouse, I do not like rodents. Yeah, that's the ooh, no, don't like them.
So Mickey Mouse puts the shits up here, does he?
Yeah, yeah, no Mickey Mouse, no Minnie Mouse, no mice at all, no rodents at all.
Stay away.
Stay away.
Moving on from mice, eggs. What is the best way of cooking eggs?
Oh, over easy. Runny yolk on toast. That's it.
That is the correct answer. And underneath the egg, is there butter on the toast or not?
Oh, absolutely. Abundant butter. Generously,
Abundant butter.
yeah, generously buttered toast with a runny yolk is the way I love eggs.
Damn straight. That is the right answer completely. Never crunchy
Absolutely.
eggs, Tiff.
No, no.
If you could magically visit any planet or heavenly body besides Earth in this solar system, just to witness it up close, without danger to you, so you'll be able to breathe there or whatever, which one are you choosing?
Wow. I look at Venus a lot. I look at Venus a lot.
Why?
It would be fun to go to the Palladians. So it'd be fun to go beyond, like out somewhere else. I don't know that I'm connected to a planet in this solar system except Earth, but you said outside of Earth. I mean, obviously we chose Earth. I want to go there. Send me there. Let's do that for a minute. Um, Venus. Let's do
Venus.
Venus. Very,
Okay.
very feminine, very, yeah. Let's do Venus today.
Challenge accepted. Right. Let's see if Musk can get you there.
Yeah, we'll take a field trip.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, that is the end of the Koit zone, which leaves us two final questions before we finish. So the first is, what else do you like to do in your downtime? Any activities or guilty pleasures that we've not discussed so far?
Oh wow. I have so many. I have a back porch that looks out over the fields and the mountain, and anytime I can spend in my hammock on the porch and do nothing, do no thing, just lay and think and dream and be, that is one of them. Yes, that's a guilty pleasure that I will take anytime.
Hammocks, just be. Love it. And that leaves our final question. Is there a project that you're currently working on at the moment?
There's so many. I'm doing a course with the Shift Network, and I'm very heavily involved in that. We're producing some show series and films that I'm probably not at liberty to talk about, or I would tell you, but they're exciting and they kind of nudge into the soul's journey and why
Oh,
we
nice.
choose. And I'm doing a spirit keeper series. It's an indigenous spirituality. It's the ancient wisdom of the traditions and ceremonies that has been done in all, shamanic cultures. I mean, it comes it's Native American, but it's also Celtic and it's also Norse, and it's just bringing in the ancient wisdom of the way people have thrived in the past, and it's a very spiritual journey that has to do with the chakras and having animal archetypes with the chakras and aligning our bodies. So those are the exciting things I'm doing right now. And maybe top, I'm a grandfather. My oldest son and his wife had a child just over a year ago, and he is the joy of my life. He's amazing. So that's a project I'm really involved with.
Yeah, that's a proper project, isn't it? Yeah.
It takes three or four project managers to get that one done.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's never complete. It's
never, it's always something more to do.
exactly. Thank you ever so much for your time and honesty. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and there's been so many phrases and nuggets of wisdom that I've picked up in it, and I hope everyone else who's watched and listening to this also picks up those nuggets and more. Thank you ever so much for your time.
You're so kind. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Excellent stuff. And guys, anyone listening and watching again, check out the links in the description. You can see all about Jeff, his site, his books, etc. Okay, so thank you ever so much, Jeff.
Cheers. We'll
Thank
talk
you.
soon.
Goodbye, everyone. Thank you. Lovely. To watch other KoitCast episodes, please click the image top left. To subscribe to my channel, please click the image top right. Please like and share to help KoitCast grow, and most importantly of all, please click the notification bell so you never miss an upload.